There's a reminder that it's been suggested that every character in every story is an aspect of our self. So let's see what arises with this Sufi allegory about the young being who lived in a village just outside the city of Bukhara. But like the city itself, the village was languishing, there was no great industry, famine in the land, and this young man could find no satisfaction, not even any work of any kind, and certainly no calling. So he decided that he would set out to make the very arduous journey to a prosperous city of Samarkand. So on the way he had many adventures, as one can imagine. But when he came to the city of Samarkand, it was prospering, so there was work to be had, and it wasn't long before he'd gathered together 300 silver pieces, which he sewed into his robe. But at that time he decided that he'd had enough adventure and perhaps he'd set out back for his hometown. But on the way to join the caravan that would take him back to Bukhara, he passed an old hermit under a tree. And the old hermit, when he approached, called out and said, "Would you like some advice? Only 100 silver pieces." So the young being was walking past, but then something called him, some irresistible force called him back. So he went over and made salutations to the old hermit, and the old hermit said, "You'd like some advice? Only 100 silver pieces." And so before he knew it, the young being said, well, yes. So he handed over his 100 silver pieces, and the old sage said, "A boulder is not safe." So the young man walked off down, scratching his head, wondering what this meant. But he joined the caravan, and the caravan was on its way. But they were on riding donkeys and one or two camels. And as they were going along, the young man saw another old hermit under a tree. And he said, "Stop, stop," because the old hermit also was calling out, "Advice given, piece of advice given, 100 silver pieces." And the young being couldn't resist somehow. In him there was that great urge, so he got down from his donkey and he went over to the old being, and the old being said, "Yeah, just 100 silver pieces for a piece of advice." So the young being took out from the hem of his robe the second 100 silver pieces and handed it over, and the old sage said, "A bridge is safe." So the young being went off scratching his head again, climbed back onto his donkey. Yeah, when they stopped for the night, he was telling the others what advice he'd received for this 100, and they all laughed at him. They laughed at him and derided him. "You stupid fellow, he's paying you all that money for pieces of advice." So they went on down the road some more, and they were just about to arrive at the desert when there under another tree was another old hermit, and again the young being couldn't resist. He stopped the caravan and said, wait, and he got down, and of course the same thing happened. The old being offered him a piece of advice for 100 silver pieces, so the young being took out his last 100 silver pieces, gave it to the old man, and the old man said, "Climb a tree." So when he went back to the caravan, the people laughed at him, his companion, "You stupid fellow, we'd give you a piece of advice, but now you've not got any money left." we're not going to bother. But they had to spend a night at a little inn before they reached the edge of the desert, and this inn happened to be situated right in front of a great boulder. And when the young being suggested that this is the advice that was given, that a boulder was not, they said, oh, this boulder's been there for centuries and centuries, that boulder is not moving anywhere. But the young man remembered the sage's advice and took it. And as the rest of his companions went in to the little inn, the earth rumbled, there was a great movement beneath it, and the boulder moved and rolled on top of the inn, killing most of the inhabitants. Well, those who remained, no need to bury their dead, they were already under the boulder. They went off and went to cross the desert. And they did so quite safely and without incident. But after moving past the desert, they came to a raging river. And spanning that river was a very precarious rope bridge. Now his companions looked at the bridge and said, this bridge is not safe to cross. We're going to wait until the river settles down and then we'll cross across. But the young being remembered the advice of the old man that a bridge was safe. So he crossed the bridge, and as he reached the other side and turned back, there he saw the rest of his companions being attacked by a band of robbers who bound them up, took their goods and led them away to sell into slavery. So now, alone, the young being traversed the rest of his journey and eventually arrived at his home village, only to find that a pride of lions had entered the village and was attacking all the people, devouring them as they went. And the young man, seeing this, remembering that in his village there was the superstition that trees were sacred and nobody was allowed to climb a tree. And even though the village was filled with large and great and giant beautiful trees, nobody climbed a tree, and they were being devoured by the lions. But the young being remembered the advice of the old man, climb a tree. And so he did, and was safe. But to his very great surprise, in the branches of the tree was a cask, and in that cask was filled with gems, jewels of all kind. So when the mayhem was over, the young being climbed down from the tree, carrying his cask of jewels, made his way into the city of Bukhara, to a jeweler's shop, to exchange the jewels for money. And to his very great surprise, the smiling jeweler behind the counter of the jewelry shop was none other than the old hermit who had given him the advice along the way. Remembering that every character in this story is an aspect of our self. How would you interpret what do these characters represent for us in our psyche, in our being?